I'm in the studio today with a racing driver known as the world's #1 touring car driver. Win Percy, what is the main thing everybody wants to talk to you about?
Oh, probably Le Mans crash at 242 miles an hour. Yeah, there had lots of good times as well, but the crash is rather memorable, I must admit.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, mainly because I've not seen it because it was so late at night. There's not really much good footage of it, is there?
No, people pretend, and there is coverage of a flash of light, and people say it's happening, but there's no proof. The only proof is what was left of the car and the fact that I'm still in one piece.
It must be quite a thing for you to get your head around something like that at the time.
Well, Le Mans special, the speed there and before they put the chicanes in, was amazing down the old Mulsanne Straight. And sadly in '86, I was dicing with a Porsche. I was in the Jaguar then, and we were running well. And that was Joe Gartner. And just after our car retired with a drive shaft problem, sadly Joe died. His transmission locked up and he went into the trees. At those sort of speeds, you really don't stand much of a chance. But that year, '86, the Armco down the Mulsanne Straight was only 2 layers. And if you looked at it and realised it was lower than this desk, I mean, you had no chance. The end of '86, after drivers protesting, and I was one of them, the organisers put an extra layer of Armco in. That's what saved my life, actually. And the Tony Southgate designed Jaguar I was driving, which was amazingly strong. That car is one of the most iconic racing cars ever, isn't it? The first time I ever sat in one, Tom Walkinshaw said to me, "Winston, you're my touring car driver. If you really want to," and I kept on and on and on about driving at Le Mans in a Group C car, "you really want to," he said, "we'll go to Paul Ricard and you can test one." He said, "Tell me the truth." He said, "No disgrace. If you don't enjoy it, if you don't want to do it, don't. However, don't keep on about it anymore. If you really enjoy it, you can go to Le Mans, probably with Jan Lammers and John Watson in that car." I sat in it, put the switches on, put the fuel pumps on, put the ignition on, pressed the starter button, and this V12 burst into life about 6 inches from my head behind me. And I thought, oh my goodness, do I really want to do this? But you know, I put it into gear, clunk, off down this beautiful circuit at Paul Ricard. Within a lap, I thought, yes, I love it. It's difficult to imagine what travelling at that kind of speed must feel like. Are you able to slow down the world around you when you're driving like that? Yeah, you honestly don't realise it. Basically, there are other cars around you doing similar speeds. There's a lot going maybe up to 100 miles an hour slower, which is the problem, especially at night or when it's wet. Getting used to that fact, and trusting that they will stay on the line that they're on. The old road, back in the 80s, when the surface wasn't so good, you had a typical road hump in the middle of the road on the white line area, so the road would drain away from heavy rains, etc. So if you were, for instance, going off down the Mulsanne and you thought about the 24-hour restaurant on the left where people sat on the Armco drinking, you didn't want to be too close to that in case there was a bottle, glass, anybody being silly. So you'd stick to the right of the circuit at the track at that speed. And then you had to get over to the left of the circuit to go through the Mulsanne just flat. You could just do it flat and comfortably. And getting the car back over to the left of the track was the biggest challenge you had, because you'd fight the wheel, fight it, and then suddenly the thing would dance to the other side of the road, And then when you got to the kink in the Mulsanne, the road was quite flat, so it wasn't a problem. The heights of driving at Le Mans and some of the incredible achievements that you had during your career, of course, nobody starts at the top. Where did you start? Well, the first thing I ever did was 1963. With my then girlfriend, we went to watch the stock cars in Weymouth Stadium, and I had a 997 Ford Anglia 105E, and they were very short of entries that night. So they announced, would anyone like to take their car around against the clock for 3 laps for a trophy? And I looked at Rosemary and grinned, and she said, "Oh, don't be silly." And I couldn't resist it. I went down to this little dirt paddock. They gave me a helmet, and there were things like Ford Zephyrs and Zodiacs and Jaguars going around. And unbelievably, I won the trophy. I was the fastest car of the evening for 3 laps. And drifting that little Anglia, it just sparked me, and I thought, this I enjoy. This is something I want to do.
Do you still have the trophy?
Well, funny enough, I gave a friend, when we moved to Spain, we haven't got the space here, I gave a friend to look after in his museum 350 trophies, and one of them is that trophy, yeah.
What a fabulous memory. So your first taste of motorsport was a taste of success. At what point did you decide that was then going to become a career for you?
I wanted to build a business, to be sure. I had friends that had gone into motorsport even at that level and got carried away with it, and I couldn't afford to do that. I was planning on getting married, and I decided that I wanted to start a garage off, which I did. So I didn't really do anything on a professional level. I went autocrossing in a big way, and Rosemary, my wife, was extremely quick. The Anglia started off as 997, 1200, 1350cc, 1500cc, 1650, 1650 twin cam. And by then, TV rallycross was the thing. And we, between us, could win prize money, which wasn't an awful lot, admittedly. But it was better than the weekly wage, you know. It was enough money to keep you in the sport. And then in 72, 73, I bought a Datsun 240Z. I was selling Datsuns from my garage in Weymouth. And I fell in love with the car. A guy advertised that he could make your Z go so quickly, a guy called Spike Anderson, Samuri Motorsport, Samuri Racing, he then called himself. And I transported the car up to him. He put Webers on it, he set the suspension up, got the thing to really handle well. And I then did a couple of races and thoroughly enjoyed it. Even beat a guy called Dr. Jonathan Palmer one day in his Marcos with my road-going 240Z. And anyway, I did a hill climb at Gerston Down, and Spike had his demonstrator there with a professional driver, and I beat him. And Spike said to me, next year I'm going to build a car and take on Porsche in the British Sports Car Championship, the Blue Circle Modified Sports Car Championship. He said, would you please drive for me? And I said, well, yes, of course. And I won the class and beat the works Porsches with that Z on such a small budget. Do you know, we did 15 races on one set of tyres. Dunlop laughed when they heard it. They could not believe it. We didn't have the money or the expertise to know that we should be changing tyres. Dunlop said if we changed them more regularly, we'd have been 2-3 seconds a lap quicker. We didn't know, but it was fun.
Racing back then seems to be a very different world to racing now. Do you feel that it's lost something as it's evolved into what it's become today?
Well, I guess most sports have. I mean, it's money, money, money. Safety comes in a different way, and safety can spoil the sport in lots of ways. The following year, 75, was my first proper works drive, and that was with Toyota in the British Touring Car Championship. They'd seen me driving for Samuri and decided they'd like me to do that. And my wage was £2,000 for the year. And I just took to it.
You mentioned the touring cars. You're, of course, incredibly well known for winning the British Touring Car Championship 3 times. I remember this well because I used to come and watch you race when I was a child at Donington Park. The atmosphere, I used to love the accessibility that we as fans could have. We could go up and walk behind the pit lane and meet you drivers, and I remember you signed my little autograph book. But that must have been an incredible time to be racing in.
I promised myself that I would never get carried away with it. The garage had to be my backstop if ever I was busted up in a car or something, you know, or I wasn't wanted. But for 40 years, basically, the end of each year, a phone call would come or someone would visit me and offer me a drive that I just had to say yes to, and an acceptable wage, something that would make me happy, nothing ridiculous, not huge money, but it didn't matter. I never argued. The offer was what was offered, and I would take it. You know, I wasn't in it to try and be clever and earn money. I was in it to earn a wage and thoroughly enjoy it. The British touring cars, I thoroughly enjoyed those years. I enjoyed the years of the class structure, where you could, with a 1600cc twin-cam Toyota Celica, take on a Dolomite Sprint, or even a Capri in the big class if the guy wasn't that professional, or even a Camaro if the brakes started to go on the Camaro. You know, you had this wonderful feeling of different capacity cars. Now, I know it's an incredible sport and it attracts a lot of interest and a lot of people and a lot of manufacturers, thankfully. But it's very difficult to tell the cars apart. You know, you have to really know the driver almost to know whether it's a Toyota, Nissan or what it is. I think that's lost some of that enjoyment, not being able to see the road car quite the same as it used to be.
The rivalries that you had as touring car drivers back then, are there any other drivers which stand out for you as really fond memories of that?
Yeah, the fat man, we called him rather unfairly, Jerry Marshall. Barry Williams, Wizzo's died recently, sadly. Tony Lanfranchi. And then you come on to the more professional ones, Andy Rouse, John Cleland, Jeff Allen. And then the latter years when I went off to either Europe or to Australia, which is a huge part of my life, as you probably know, and that was to attack Bathurst, this mountain race in '85 with the Jaguars, when most Australians, in fact all Australians, said, well, those things will never finish. But we did, and we won it.
Australia must have been a huge challenge for you.
Yeah, it was. We took the Jaguars there, as I say. We took 3 Jags in '85, and we won the big race, and people couldn't believe it. Do you know, the next day, this is where motorsport helps manufacturers. We all transported back to Sydney, and to say thank you, we went into the King's Cross, into the Jaguar dealer, to just do a bit of PR work, as we're doing now, and say thank you for what we've done, for what they've done for us, sorry. And there was a queue of people coming to the dealership, and they didn't even know that it was an XJS Jaguar. All they knew was that Jaguar that won the mountain race yesterday, that's what I want. Can I order one, please? It was that amazing. And that was the first time that I ever saw win on Sunday, sell on Monday, you know, in a motor trade business.
So how long did you stay in Australia for?
Tom took me out in '85. I fell in love with the place, and I went back all but 1 year up to '89, when Tom had a big interest then in Holden special vehicles, which is the same as he had with Jaguar Sport, taking production cars, modifying them body-wise, performance-wise, suspension-wise and all that, and then selling them through the dealers or through TWR. What he did, he went to Australia and he set up a very similar thing over there. But he also inherited, if he wanted it, the Holden racing team. And he got me to go up to his office in Oxford in December '89, and he said, Winston, I need you to go to Australia next year. I said, yeah, no problem. I thought he meant Bathurst. He said, no, hold on. He said, I want you to go and live in Australia next year. What? He said, well, this is what I've got for you. And he had a piece of paper, my budget, my salary, a factory in Ferntree Gully Road, and sponsors, possible sponsors, Castrol, Park Royal Hotels, a few sponsors that I had to go and work with. And I said, you're joking. He said, no. So would you do it for me? He said, if you don't, he said, I don't know who's going to do it for me, and I can't lose it. I don't want to lose this opportunity. I said, well, I'm on my way to the airport, as you well know, to go to New Zealand to race the Nissan for Freddie Gibson in the 2 races, Wellington Street Race and Pukekohe, Auckland. I said, I'm only come this way to see you. I'm going to the airport now. Can I phone my wife? Didn't have mobile phones then. Can I phone Rosemary when I get to the airport? And if she agrees to come with me, yeah, I'll do it. So I phoned Rosemary from the airport, explained it. She said, wow, do you want to do it? I said, yeah, only if you'll come with me. She said, yeah, I'll do it. We'll go. So 1990, January, off we went to Australia, found this factory, had no staff, literally started interviewing people that I'd met and admired in other teams. So I poached them, actually, to start the team off. Yeah, we had quite a good year that year doing the Australian Touring Car Championship. No great results. By then, the Sierra Cosworths were dominating. The Nissan GTRs were coming on in a big way. So we were outclassed with the Holden Commodore V8. We were getting 520 brake horsepower. Nissans were on 650, 4-wheel drive. You know, it's ridiculous. Sierras were getting 650. Anyway, the big thing there is Bathurst again. And we went there with a car that I believed wasn't going to be a front runner straight away, but it was bulletproof. You know, I took on an Australian co-driver, Alan Grice, who I respected, and we drove that car absolutely flat out for the 7 hours of the race, 1,000 and we won it. And that was amazing. I phoned Tom that night and told him, Tom, by the way, you know, great race and we won it. He said, yeah, go on. No, I said, I'm serious. He said, yeah, go on. I said, no, Tom. He said, I'll phone you in the morning. He didn't believe me because he thought we'd be outclassed, but we drove so hard that the turbos blew on the Sierras. The Nissan had suspension problems and transmission problems, and we just kept going.
Now, of course, we've already touched briefly on the Le Mans cars that you drove and that iconic silk cut Jaguar. How, as a driver, do you prepare yourself mentally for a race that lasts for 24 hours?
Well, as you know, there's ideally 2 drivers. That's the ideal package because you know each other. He gets out of the car. He has a chance to tell you if there's any problems. You know his weaknesses or his strength. He will know mine. Ideally 2. But normally it's 3 in those days. Now, unbelievably, they're looking at sometimes 5 drivers. Preparation-wise, I don't know. Never really thought that much about it. Gone there, done the practice. I would say that Le Mans 24-hour is more mentally challenging. Spa 24-hour touring car event, or the Nürburgring 24-hour touring car event, or Bathurst 1000k are physically more demanding, whereas the speeds at Le Mans, the necessity to be mentally prepared and stable and relaxed. I mean, you go down the Mulsanne at that speed. I told you my initials a while ago. It's like a radio station. My parents were crazy. And one night, that was 86, we were going well, and I pressed the radio button, and I said, Eddie, my number 1, I said, Eddie, this is WWFLP calling, I'm bored. And you're doing that ridiculous speed, and you're holding the steering wheel, you're looking at the gauges, and there's nothing else to do, just your foot's flat to the boards. The one thing that amazed me was slipstreaming. I got one of the Porsches, and I knew I was a little bit quicker, and I could come up behind it in a straight line, and within a couple of meters from it, I just stopped. I couldn't, it was like a buffer. And coming out just half a car, getting the air to wrap around my car, and it just crept upon him then, and I was able to go alongside him, couldn't go any farther past him because the air then caught me the same. So in other words, we were just status quo. But the fact is I had the inside line then for the corner. But that's how you learn these things. I had to go at NASCAR once, and the Americans taught me how to wear other people's tires out by bringing the back of their car down or taking it up, you know? Amazing sensation, actually, going up against the wall and feeling the wall buffeting you at 170 miles an hour, you know. I thoroughly enjoyed that, actually.
We talked about the touring cars, we talked about the Le Mans, we talked about Australia. You just mentioned NASCAR, which must have been an adventure. Did you never want to knock on the door of Formula One?
I was too old when I started, to be honest. I mean, when I got into professional racing, I was already 30. Martin Brundle, we took Martin on to represent Norfolk in the BMW County Championship. And Tom said to me, we need a driver for Norfolk. He said, and what about this young bloke Brundle? I said, yeah, because I used to rally across with John, his father. I said, yeah, I said, I think that's a pretty good choice. The boy went and won the first race, didn't he? He was that good, and he knew Snetterton like the back of his hand. It was his local circuit. And Martin had this test with Tyrrell at Silverstone. And I said, go on, tell me how it goes. He said, I promise I will. That night he phoned me. I said, God, what was it like? He said, Winston, he said, you could do it with your eyes shut. He said, the first lap, you think, oh my goodness. The second lap, The third lap, come on. And he said, that's how quick you get used to it. And it was the same with Group C. Once at Mount Fuji, I was with Nissan then. That was 88. I had 1,000 brake horsepower in absolutely torrential rain. Now that was a challenge.
Now, of course, you're retired and you're living here with us on the Costa del Sol. How long have you been here for?
On and off 10 years. It's 15 years ago I was disabled by a mistake in hospital. The race that I just competed in was at the British Grand Prix support race with the D-type Jaguar that won Le Mans with Mike Hawthorne in 55. And I love that drifting sensation of this D-type Jaguar. No grip, lots of grunt, and a heavy car. And it was like drifting my Anglia back in the 60s. It was amazing. And I left that race, having thoroughly enjoyed it at Silverstone, went home, had a disc prolapse, went to hospital, and sadly they operated at the wrong level and paralysed me, basically. Incomplete paraplegic. So racing was suddenly all over. But the latter years of historic and classic motorsport was amazing. I mean, I could have gone on doing that till I dropped, I think, you know.
Why did you choose to settle on the Costa del Sol?
Well, April '03, I think it was, we came down for a holiday, and at that time, I could have probably raced in excess of 30 weekends of the year somewhere in the world, starting with Australia, Phillip Island, then the Grand Prix at Melbourne, with classic and historic cars, and earning a decent wage and being looked after with first-class flights and everything. I mean, I had 46 trips to Australia alone. It was a very good life ahead of me, and some amazing cars, millions of pounds worth of cars, because being a mechanic, I think people accepted the fact that I did look after them mechanically. You know, I understood the mechanics of these cars. And Rosemary said, when I would love somewhere to go in the winter while you're away. So we looked down here for somewhere. We found something off plan, put a deposit on it, and then 6 months later I was paralysed. So it went from a holiday home to something we used most winters, and now it's a full-time home. We're Spanish residents now.
But the paralysis hasn't stopped your involvement in motorsport completely, has it?
No, I've got hand controls on cars. I've got a copy of my 240Z Samurai and a lovely Jaguar F-Type convertible. And I belong to most of the car clubs down here, the Soul Club being one of them, Jaguar Car Club. And I can enjoy the cars. We go on the runs and everything. No competition whatsoever, obviously, but I can still enjoy motorsport, yeah.
What kind of bits and pieces do you have at home that you just look at and go, wow, that brings all the memories back to you?
Well, I guess the ones I probably will hold on to are the Bathurst Winners' Trophy, and that was 90. In 91, again, we beat all but one of the Sierras and the Nissans, and we came second with a similar car. One Nissan kept going and beat us. So I've got those trophies. One race suit. I'll be honest with you, I have given away all these things. I've got one suit left. The jacket that I say is my $2 million jacket. Tom had the $2 million, I had the jacket. That was winning Bathurst, which I keep. Otherwise, it is probably books or paperwork, or I am actually, or posters or things. I haven't actually got much left now, but yeah, most of it went.
I really could sit here and talk to you all day because I find this stuff so enjoyable and interesting. But time is now against us. I have got to thank you sincerely for coming in and sharing these stories. I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting you today.
Well, no problem at all. If you want me to come back at any time, please say so.
You will be welcome here at any time, especially if there's a Jaguar going to be parked outside the radio station.
No problem.
93.6 Global Radio.